Hey everyone, welcome to TechTO and to Next in Text. I am Swish Goswami, CEO and co-founder of Trufan. I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder that's learned quite a bit over the last few years of what it takes to scale a successful startup here in Canada. Right off the bat, I can tell you the journey is not easy, and this show is not going to shy away from the hurdles that we all face. Over the next few weeks, I'm thrilled to welcome some of Canada's amazing entrepreneurs to the stage to share all the highs and lows of the journey. And I'm hoping that at the end of this 1 hour, you'll leave these conversations feeling inspired to dig into your own work and maybe take away some pointers for mistakes to avoid along the way. This show is all about shining a light on the realities of work, and we want you to stay engaged and be a part of the conversation throughout the hour. Here's some tips for interacting with us during the show. Number one, you can set up your profile with your image and LinkedIn link by clicking the circle in the top right corner of your screen. Number two, there's an emoji cannon. I know, it's amazing. It's an emoji cannon on the right side of your screen. It's our way of reacting to the conversation. Go ahead and try it now. You can send some applause, some thumbs up, some rocket ships if you want. I want to see how you're feeling throughout the conversation, so please use that emoji cannon. Number three, if you haven't already found it, there's a chat on the right-hand side of the screen. Feel free to share messages, ideas, thoughts in the chat throughout the show. We might also pull up one of your thoughts or one of your ideas onto the screen and show it to everyone. And finally, you can submit your questions using the question mark button. The question mark button, I believe, should be on the right side of the screen. We'll answer as many questions as we can near the end of the show. So let's dig into today's conversation. We're all here to discuss the topic around acquiring your first customers. Getting that first, yes, I will buy it. I remember for Trufan, we sell audience data to brands. And we got our first customer without even having our full platform built out about 3 years ago. We provided data exports of a client's top fans on Twitter and sent it to them in a keynote presentation that detailed all their noteworthy fans on Twitter, all their new fans that didn't exist a week ago on Twitter. And our first client was Western Union. It was a pretty big deal, and we were able to get to them through a cold message. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about some of the strategies that people have to use in order to get their first customer, regardless of how raw or scrappy it might be. What we want to know right now, if possible, put it in the chat, introduce yourself. What strategies are you using to source your own first customers? Put it in the chat. We would love to see that. And while you're sharing your thoughts in the chat, I'm also excited to welcome today's guest to the conversation, Khushboo Jha. She's CEO and founder of BuyProperly. And she's also someone that's no stranger to the tech community. She spent 5 years at Amazon under various portfolios, including the Alexa product lead for product technologies. She's a featured speaker at Product School and is an official member of the Forbes Real Estate Council. Please give me an amazing time here. Very excited, Khushboo, to have you on the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. That was a great intro, Swish. Thank you for having me on the show. Excited to be here.
No worries. So to kick things off, Khushboo, obviously today's question is around, what strategy did you use to acquire your first customers? That's a question that everyone had to answer in the chat. Why don't you chime in? How did you go about finding your own first customers for BuyProperly?
Yeah, so I think I was listening to your story backstage, and we kind of had a similar start where we had built out a wait list of about almost 1,000 customers before we had gone live. But then we were so afraid to actually sell. We weren't ready yet, and we had a huge wait list, and we wanted to make sure that we have the perfect product before we actually open up. So we had created an invite-only gate. But before we get into the customers, maybe I'll talk a little about the product, because our product is relatively new to the market. Our platform allows people to invest in fractions of real estate. So you can basically buy a small portion of a house. We have primarily single-family rentals. So these are rental properties. So say you put in 5,000, you get a share of that house. So you will get a share of the rent that house generates. And when that house sells, you get a share of the appreciation. The advantage of doing through a platform like ours is, the end-to-end process is online, simple. You're not running around. All the data is right there in front of you. And B, our minimum is really low. It's at 2,500. So the idea was to allow everybody to invest.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
And fractional shares is very popular right now too, actually. So it's an ideal time to start something like this, especially for
Exactly.
real estate.
Yes, and real estate is really unaffordable. In Toronto, like the average house price is about 11 times the average income.
Hmm.
So it's out of reach for me, for a lot of average Canadians, and fractional allows you to be just part of that rather than sitting on the sidelines. So when we bought our domain and we presented at Collision, we hadn't created much yet. People signed up like, okay, when can I start buying this product? Like, when can I start making investments in this? So there's a lot of initial interest that we had. But doing the actual transactions, we actually chose people who were part of our close network to launch with, rather than open it up to all the 1,000 people who were on the wait list. We made it an invite only for launch and invited only our close customers to join us for the first one.
Got it. And you mentioned something at the very beginning of your answer around, we were waiting for the perfect product. And I hear a lot of founders say that again and again, like we're waiting for the perfect product to come out. But do you ever get to that? If you had to kind of redo and go back and do it all over again, would you probably not want to just wait for that and get something out ASAP and get feedback? Like, how would you change things if you had to go back and try to acquire your first customer again?
Yeah, we could have launched actually much earlier. I mean, it took us only 4 months to go live with the platform. But while we would have given them the same returns in terms of fractional as a concept, we would probably not have been able to show them how easy real estate investing can be made. And our intent, and primarily because me and the early team were all ex-Amazon, was to make it, our job was to say, can we make it as simple as buying stuff on Amazon? That was the goal. And we wanted to replicate that experience for real estate, to say, okay, everything in the background, all the logic, all the data is happening, KYC, AML, suitability, all compliance is happening in the background. But at the front side, when the customer comes in, is just a few clicks away and they get the property shares. And it was super important for us to make people believe that not only can they invest in real estate with a small amount, they can do it as easily and as simply. So that experience, getting that right, was very important for us, which is why I think we were waiting for launching. So I think if we were to go back, maybe we could have done it a little earlier, but we would have still wanted people to realize that, oh, I can do the same thing with real estate as I do at Amazon every day.
That makes sense. And then when it comes to setting up that waiting list and getting people on it, what were some of the strategies you guys used to get a wait list, or even to share the invite only platform?
If I'll be honest with you, I don't think there was any major strategy. Our idea was, in the beginning, was to before we built and went far ahead, it was important that we talk to people. So you're just going ahead and talking to people, and they were like, hey, is there a wait list? Can I sign up? And we're like, no, maybe we should create one. And so we created one. But our core intention at that point was to talk to as many people as possible and understand what their pain points really are, so that we are solving the biggest pain points. Like, if I can solve a lot of pain points, and people have a lot of problems in life, I can't solve for all of it, at least not on day one. So we had to choose the biggest pain point. And so we wanted to speak to lots and lots of people. And that's how that wait list happened. We spoke to almost 150 people before we wrote a single line of code.
Wow.
And spoke to them for 15, 20, 30-minute proper discussions. And then they kept talking about us to other people. Oh, they're doing this thing. And then they had ideas and they wanted to. So that's how kind of the wait list got built up, because these 150 people then started speaking about us to their network, their colleagues. They put it in their company Slack, things like that. And that's how it went about.
That's awesome. No, I know there's a quote that Brian Chesky from Airbnb put out, and he said that the third time after they had launched Airbnb, the kind of mantra they were going for was to find 100 people that would love them and talk to them and just get them obsessed about Airbnb. And he said that was possibly one of the hardest things he had to do, because it's easy to find 100 people that like your product, but it's really hard to find 100 people that love your product, that are absolutely obsessed with it. So it's awesome that you guys took the approach of going and talking to customers right away, as opposed to just building something and hoping that they'll come. I do want to transition into the first stages of your journey in our expectations versus reality segment.
Sure.
This is the portion where we're going to go back to the early stages of acquiring first customers. And for those of you watching, by the way, let us know in the chat, what expectations did you have about launching? Because Khushboo, my question to you is, what were your expectations around nurturing relationships with your first customers? What approach did you take? Were you surprised about certain things when it came to nurturing that relationship? And how did you refine it as you grew?
Yeah, so I feel like first customers are probably the most valuable set of customers as a startup. And when you go in, you're basically kind of going with this approach that you're looking for people, you're looking for early adopters, you're looking for like based on basic strategy, whose pain point are you solving the most, and so on. But then the other way to look at it would be to say, hey, I'm also looking for brand champions. I'm looking for people who would actually also give me feedback, sort of a thing, more holistically. And that's kind of how it was for us. So our early customers became our champions. They would give us feedback about the product. They would tell us what else they wanted, what else would change it for them. But I think when we were trying to sell to them, one of the things that we did was we assumed that we didn't want to burden them or ask too much of them. But then we discovered that actually the customers were more than willing to help us because we were solving a pain point for them, and they were willing to pay. They were willing to join us as paying customers. They were willing to invest because ours is an investment product. And they were willing to support us way more than we wanted. We weren't asking enough. So, which was an interesting insight that actually the first customers that we were looking at were happy to help us actually make it better for them.
Got it. And then, to play devil's advocate, imagine I'm starting a company during COVID. People are so tired, I feel, of getting on Zoom, right? They're so tired of, they had too many Zoom calls in the day. How would you go about enticing customer feedback now, right? Like, are you giving away a $20 Amazon gift card, or are you just really trying to sell the product, get people excited? Like, how do you get them basically to become an advocate for you? Because some people might come on, they might be on a Zoom call and just give you feedback, and then they're done for the day and they don't think about you ever again. But how do you really, in that conversation, make them an advocate, make them someone that can go and tell their friends about it, etc.?
Yeah, so we knew that word of mouth was a big deal for us. It was the one that was propelling all the success from before the launch. And so we thought of having a referral program, and like you said, gift card in all of that. And people are like, yeah, sure, I'm happy to refer. But then we started talking to them, and we realized that they didn't care about the referral money, actually.
Cool.
So they're like, hey, I mean, I have a job, I earn. I mean, that referral money isn't moving the needle for me. So they didn't care about that cash. What they cared about more was that they could provide inputs in the area that they worked in. So if you were speaking to a person who came from the UX background, or if the customer was a UX person, he was more than happy to help us on the UX side and say, I can give you feedback on this component. It was more important for them to be valued and to be heard of how they are thinking about us or what they think of us than the actual cash. So when we were, we spent a majority of our time in COVID because we started in late September 2019, and most of our life has been in COVID. So it's all Zoom interactions with customers as it is. But I think it was understanding what really motivates them. I mean, so it was respect, recognition, and like genuinely giving value to what they were providing us as feedback. So that is probably what was motivating them to get to know us more and get to know us better, and then spread word about us. We also realized that as in the real estate space, there are a lot of people trying to sell a lot of things. So our approach of just being transparent and saying, hey, here's the data. It's not me trying to sell you. Here is all of the data. We have an AI model. So we've looked at 250,000 data points. This is where we are landed. And this is how we are doing it. And this is the exact cost that has happened. $30 in the key deposit, $50 for the parking fob, and so on. People liked that approach. So not trying to sell them too much, but just being transparent kind of helped them come back to us and give us their genuine pain points and benefits that they're looking for more and more.
Got it. And that transparency, I would imagine, appeals also to a lot of younger consumers. I don't know, like, who's your target demographic? Is it mainly, people that have just graduated? I could see that audience, for example, want to do something like this, right? Maybe they can't afford to buy property right out of graduation or, a couple of years into a job, but maybe fractionally they can get involved in real estate. Is that kind of a core target market?
I think that's a good question for the expectation versus reality. So that was our expectation.
Right.
But in reality, we of course have that segment, which is fresh out of college and is looking to just understand real estate, and this is their entry point. But we also have reasonably experienced people who've bought their own property, who have a principal residence, who maybe own an investment property, who also join us on the platform and are pretty avid supporters and repeat customers, actually, because they have gone through the hassle and they realize it's not just money that's a problem, but even with the money, it's a problem. Because the experience isn't great. The process isn't as transparent or easy or simple. So it's extreme. There's a lot of data asymmetry. And so we have both kinds of customers. So people who are young, fresh, and are exploring this investment class, but also people who would have anyways invested, say maybe 100 grand. Now they just diversified across 5 properties and 4 properties rather than put it all in one. Right. And they can just do it online, which means they don't have to step out of the house, which in COVID worked in our favor because nobody wanted to go to the bank and go to other houses and hang out with the realtor. They didn't want to deal with it. So just invested with us.
No one ever wants to go to a bank. I feel very few people I feel happiness from going to a bank. But my last question, I guess, just to wrap up the segment would be, was there anything else, Khushboo, throughout the journey of building BuyProperly that you came into entrepreneurship feeling like, okay, this is how things are probably going to play out, and then they went the total opposite? Like, are there any kind of other, expectations that you had that were totally mismatched with the reality that came out?
I think it is a lot of hard work. I think we talk about customer and data, which is great when you are a larger company. When you are a younger company early on, it's all relationships. I mean, people have to love your product. People have to love the approach. You have to solve their problem to win it. It's not like people are not doing impulse purchases with startups. They are often doing an emotional connect with the startup. And that's very different from what you read, because you're learning about, if you're reading the book called Traction, it talks about 19 channels you need to explore, which we did. We followed a lot of the textbook stuff. So we followed a lot of experimentation and channels and think about advertising and messaging and all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, at least in the early phases, it's all about being honest, transparent, and building a genuine relationship with your customers. And we have, I think, in our journey, over time, it took us some time to realize that the rest of it is okay. This is the must-have when you're dealing with customers. We had assumed that most of our customers will probably invest with us once a year because it's an investment product. But we realized that once they have invested with us, they keep coming back. Because the first time on, we weren't trying to just oversell them. We said, here's all the data. And this is how, and when they compare to their existing experience, they realize this is better returns, much simpler, more transparent, no hidden costs. So just earning that trust was super important.
I love that. So now that we've talked about, these early days, what you've learned, I think really the importance of going direct to your customer, talking to them, getting feedback. I'm excited about, hearing any of those first moments that you had throughout your experiences in our next segment of the show, which we call Founder First. Khushboo, we have 4 questions for you about some of the first big moments of your founder journey. For everyone watching, by the way, comment in the chat your answers to these questions. We'd love to see your answers as well. Number 1, Khushboo, tell us about your first customer. Do you remember who they were and kind of what was the story in order to be able to acquire them?
Absolutely. So this was somebody who had signed up on a wait list to say, hey, when the deal goes live, you let us know. And we would love to invest in your first deal. And we're like, okay, that's awesome. And we hadn't gone live yet. And the person was actually leaving for vacation to Australia. And he checked with us like, hey, are there any deals left? I'm going away for 6 months. So if you're not live yet, then maybe I'll come back and invest. And I was like, okay, then I might miss out my first customer. one of my customers is kind of going to be away. And so we signed a deal and I called him and I said, hey, the deal is live. Would you like to go online and do the transaction? He's like, oh, but I'm leaving for the airport. Like, I'm leaving today. I have a flight to catch, so I'm packing. And I've created the profile on your website, but I don't have time to do the transaction. Like, we're too busy. And I leave in 1 hour. So I actually said, okay, fine. Forget the online transaction. I am coming over. I'll collect the check. I'll give you all of the details in person, because I didn't want him to fly without the doing the transaction. Yeah. So I drove down to his house, collected the physical check, and said, okay, you can complete the rest of the process online. You'll see it in your dashboard online, and you can check it from your internet on the airport. And so that was our first customer, where we had like less than an hour to go over to Ice and actually collect the money. But it was great.
I love that.
Because
I love that. I feel like your mentality, like even if you had flown to Australia, you would have just flown just to get that check and then come back. But I love that. That's
customer amazing. Acquisition cost versus lifetime value wouldn't allow that. but otherwise, maybe.
You see a spike on the CAC. It's like, what happened there? Okay, that makes sense. What about the first time you thought, what the hell am I doing? I bet there's been multiple moments. I have them like 4 or 5 times a day. But like the first time that you vividly were like, what the hell am I doing?
So this was again actually a customer interaction. So the customer had come in, had done a few conversations with somebody else on the team. They had still a bunch of questions. And so I got into a call with the customer. In person, again, not in person. Like, I consider Zoom as in person.
Oh dear!
As long as you can see the person on video, I consider it in person.
Right.
Because I can see their expressions and whether or not they disliked what I just said. And then this person was almost kind of like bashed the product, said how unbaked it is. You inspire no trust. I don't know if it's secure. And I talked to him about the encryption we use and how it has so much data encryption. And then like, how do I know you won't fly by night? I was like, okay, we are backed by Fasken, who's the lawyer who's done our documents. This is a trust account. This is what we are backed in terms of taxes, in terms of audit, in terms of legal. So PwC is doing our taxes. Everything is structured in a very, very compliant manner. But he kept finding reasons why we were doing it all wrong.
Right.
And he ended by saying, oh, I know you want to be a wannabe developer, but I think it takes a lot of years and money and hard work to become a developer. But I'm not even trying to be a developer.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, if this is the end customer, have I got it all wrong? And like the product that I have spent so much time trying to make sure that it's actually good for the end customer. The customer doesn't care about all of the legal checks, the compliance checks, the encryption, the data storage that we worked so hard to get right. It's one of those moments like, it's probably not even worth it. We should just have like a fancy website and a bunch of advertisement and people are okay with that, rather than all of the fine tuning and working with some of the best in Canada to get that right, which is the unglamorous, under the hood stuff.
Right. And follow up to that before we go into the next verse, but how do you go about dealing with stuff like that? Because customer trolls, I think they happen in every business, right? Customers are a little bit let's just say, malicious at times if they feel like they've been, given the wrong product, or if the wrong expectations were provided to them, or just maybe for the sake of trolling. Some people do that, right? Especially on the internet. How do you go about dealing with that? Do you just, do you sit down with your team and talk to them? Do you go for a walk? Like, what is your way of dealing with, that level of just feedback when it comes in?
Well, when you're messaging about your company, and that's true for any company, everybody gets to see it. Some people would like it, some people would not like it. Everybody is entitled to their opinion. So it's as important to, while it feels bad getting bashed, you have to respect that they are coming from a point of view and context. So everybody has a context and a worldview. And I think it's acknowledging what they think we are doing is the first step. So then that kind of takes out the emotion part of it and say, okay, rationally thinking, this is what the person is trying to convey. Maybe there's some merit in it. Maybe we there is another way of how we position ourselves. Maybe there's another way we communicate better. Maybe there is some merit in what he is giving us. Maybe we should think about becoming a developer. But also just always taking that feedback and taking it through a filter. So usually we don't cast away customer feedback. We may use some right away. We may keep some on the side. But I think anybody who has taken time out to speak to us, out of respect, we have to acknowledge their feedback and understand in the context.
Got it. And then to flip that, I guess, to the other side, what was one of your first breakthrough aha moments? Like, holy crap, I'm a genius, I figured it out. What were some of one of the first moments in that journey?
So there was one customer who came to us when we had not launched. So we were doing an educational webinar. Because real estate is so black box for a lot of people, we do a lot of educational events. We want people to make informed choices and decisions. And so we do tons of, not only do we provide educational tools on our website, we do events which are free. Usually we invite finance professors to talk about finance concepts and how to evaluate real estate, etc. And this customer had come for one of those events. So the team was excited, like, great, early on, another customer. And then he kept coming to our events, very interested in investing with us when we go live. So we invited him over when we actually did go live. He actually came over to our office because he wanted to see that we have an office. So it was great. So we kind of played this dance for a really long time. Like, for several months, we would meet him at least once or twice a month. And he was looking to invest the minimum, but that's okay. He was a valuable customer. We appreciated him, and we kept talking to him after about 5-6 months of talking to him every few weeks. We felt like we can give up now. And he said, oh, I'm not ready to invest. I'd not go ahead, maybe in future. So we thought, okay, fine. But we did our best, whatever he asked. Even after that, we kept answering, explaining, etc. And then I think 6 months after he had said no, we saw a transaction come in under his name. I was like, wait, is this?
Is it?
And so we checked out his legal name and stuff, like, yep, it is him. Interesting. And he did a transaction. And then 3 weeks later, he did another. Like, okay, is it him again? Did he do this in error? Has he actually sent in the money? Can we make sure the money actually came into the bank? And then he sent us this long, heartfelt email saying how we have been answering his questions, we have been transparent, we are doing this, and he's glad we are doing this. Of course, there's lots of room for improvement, but he's happy to support us and be a part of this journey, etc. Yeah. And that suddenly was this really delightful moment where all of the months of hard work seemed like it was written on paper. It's a really long email that he wrote to me, and I shared with the team, like, hey, he wrote us an email. And probably that was, like, I think the best moment in my entire journey, to see a customer convert And it also spoke to the fact that when the customer said he's not ready, he was really not ready. When he just did the transaction any which ways. He's now like our repeat customers across multiple deals. He basically invests every time there's a deal up.
Right. I love that. That's amazing. And how do you go about rewarding him? Like, is there anything you show like appreciation for, in the sense of like, do you just, casually like give him new updates on what potentially might be coming out soon? Do you give him like a sneak peek on potential deals you're putting out? Like, how do you go about just, keeping him super engaged and just making him feel very valued?
So yes, we do give him all of that, but we are weird in that sense. So we also keep warning him that, remember, real estate is not the only asset class you should invest in. Make sure you diversify across asset classes, because at the end of the day, we want him to be successful in life. But then yes, we do share updates. So not just about the deals, but also about the things that we are doing. So we would share that, hey, we added this new feature. You may want to check it out. Let us know what you think. He's a software engineer, so we often share some new tech when we launch and say, hey, can you check this out? And he's quite excited about that, because that's his strength area.
Got it. Love that. And then final question within the segment, what is the first step you recommend the audience take to acquire their first customers? Past just, again, opening up their laptop, maybe going on LinkedIn. Like, what is that first big step that you recommend to them to acquire their first customers?
I feel like sometimes founders are, and I was guilty of this, not as open to tapping their own network. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I know of other founders who aren't necessarily sure they want to sell to their network. What if they appear salesy? What if they are treated as another salesperson? But when you've built a product to actually solve a real pain point, you should be okay selling to your network, people you know, because there you also get very genuine feedback from those people. But if it is a real product, it's not a sham, then you should be okay selling to them. And I think that's sort of what I did eventually, with maybe a little back and forth. But I think it is super important early on to make sure you tap into people like colleagues, ex-colleagues, friends, spouses, colleagues, all of that, because that's how the early customers come from. They don't come from SEO ad optimization, because you are a nobody at that point in time when you're launching. So Google ads don't get you early customers. People who know you are the ones who know what you're capable of, can trust you, and they'll be more willing to take a chance if it solves their pain point, of course.
Got it. So final few questions before we go into audience questions. And guys, it would be awesome if you could throw in your questions in the chat. We will definitely pull them up right after. Khushboo, your thoughts on bootstrapping or funding in these early stages? Have you guys taken on investment? What's your philosophy behind that?
Yes, so we actually have taken on investments. We had raised an angel round very early on when we were starting out. And then we've recently also raised a round, pretty confidential still, not public yet. But I think in terms of bootstrapping, I guess bootstrapping is another term for us to say, hey, just dip into your own money. And that is bootstrapping, right? And so if you do intend to bootstrap, it's basically saying you have enough reserves, because last thing you want is to be thinking about how you would pay your rent or your mortgage and all of that. That's a huge distraction when you're building a company. So you cannot be thinking about that when you're building the company. You need to know that for the next 6 months, 8 months, I have reserves to carry on the life that I have been leading and still build a company. Which means basically you have to plan in advance. So there are lots of great stories about, the founder started in a garage. Sure, I mean, yes, Jeff Bezos started in a garage, but his dad gave him $250K. So it was a garage, and it was with a $250K free money.
It was a nice garage.
It was a nice garage. And so I think it's important that you plan financially to make sure that you're not worried about your rent and mortgage and utilities when you are building the company. That's
Got it.
super important, and not count on fundraising at least in the early stages.
Got it. Is BuyProperly ever going to look at fundraising? Would that be something you guys are open to down the road?
So we have done fundraising.
Got it.
We've raised an angel round, and we've recently raised a pre-seed as well.
Awesome. That's great. Congrats. I would love if you could speak to this quote. Maybe it is even tied to fundraising, but the quote is, "The value of failure is underrated." What kind of comes out to you when you think about that quote?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that. So
Right.
I think every time you make a mistake or get something wrong, there is so much to learn from that. Like, I feel like sometimes people are just afraid to try because you're worried you would fail. And when you are doing a startup, you have to assume that things will not work. And you have to assume that you'll try 10 things and only one of them will work. So rather than try and optimize for every component, you just assume that 90% chance it's going to fail, and have a backup to say, hey, okay, what happens when this fails? What happens if the customer doesn't buy? What's my backup? Like, having a plan B is what is like the most important, probably.
Got it. Got it. And what was kind of your plan B? Did you guys have one in mind when it came to acquiring your first customers? Do you remember what your guys' plan B was if you guys weren't able to go out and get a few customers?
But remember, we had created that wait list. So we were like,
Right.
okay, we had created segmentation within that wait list. We had taken people's interest to understand how much they were looking to invest. So we knew that this is the first circle. If this fails, then we go to the next circle. If this fails, then we go to the third circle. And worst case worst, we will probably use some of our own company money to close on the deal and then take it from there. Because if you're buying real estate, you can't sign an agreement and not buy.
Right.
Yeah. You just can't do that. You have to. So we needed to have a plan B of the cash.
Got it. And then in terms of, you've mentioned, obviously having an unpleasant customer experience. How did you go about actually handling that? Like if you had to kind of remember that terrible experience, when a customer isn't the right fit, or they're not worth your time, or they just, their energy and their vibe is a bit off. How do you go about handling that situation? Because obviously I feel like you handled it probably with class and respect, but is there anything that you think people should know about when it comes to handling unpleasant customer conversations?
No, I think it's very easy to get emotional in unpleasant conversations, but I think that's a good place to try and become objective and data oriented to say, okay, this customer gave me 4 negative feedbacks points. These are the things that was thrown at me. This is the data that was thrown that was against me. Maybe I'll go research more and just have some of these objections in your back pocket prepared for the next time you meet somebody. But I think it's more important to not try and convince the person to move over to your side, but acknowledge that, okay, you may be different viewpoints, but there is some commonality, and just find some common ground. I wish I could say there's a clear strategy or thumb rule to deal with unpleasant customers. I think you have to view every customer as a customer, irrespective of their interaction style, and just add that as a data point. Early on, the biggest thing in any startup lacks is data points. You don't have data to make any conclusions. You don't have data to make insights or draw trends or project. It's a ton of assumptions. So some of these interactions help you ground you down. Early, I think not just early on, even now, every time, ever since I became a founder, when I meet somebody, there are only first two questions that go into my mind. And this is true for friends, family, distant relatives, customers, random person on the street. Can that person be an end customer for me? Will my platform solve a problem? There's random people. Like, I meet somebody at the bank, and I was like, you my product? Maybe I could sell you my product. And then the second alternate question is like, could this person join my team? Like, can I add somebody like him to my team? Would it be good to have this person on my team? And so I go around with that thing in my mind, like, is this an end customer? That's the first question. So that includes a bank teller, a bank manager, somebody went for a mortgage, the property inspector, appraisal person, whoever comes my way. And yes, friends, family, relatives, they're all party to that. But I was almost obsessed with finding customers initially.
I love that. And imagine that, we were doing an interview, we are doing an interview. Imagine, geez, that was a terrible start to the question, but imagine that I was becoming a first customer of BuyProperly. What are some of the key questions that you would ask me in order to, guide you in acquiring your next few customers? Are there any specific, is there like 2 questions that you're like, these are my hidden gems that I ask every potential customer? And I think these questions really get the conversation going and can help me acquire future customers as well.
So I think the most important thing is to understand how much they know about real estate and what they think of it. Everybody is talking about real estate. Like, it's other than politics, it has become the favorite pastime of Canada to talk about real estate. You may not be able to invest in it, but everybody's talking about how house prices are going up, how this is happening, how condos are vacant, how the taxes. Everybody's talking about real estate. So it's easy to understand in this whole conversation around real estate, where do they stand? What's their viewpoint? That's usually the first, that always establishes a common ground. And that also gets me a sense of, are they investor kind? Are they looking to buy a house for themselves? Before we do any other conversation. So that's the first question I would usually ask. The second question I would typically ask them is, what do they not like about this whole setup? Because that very easily leads me to my solution, because no matter what they have done in this space or they think of this space, we are probably solving a few of those problems. We are making it easy. We are making it less time consuming. It's online. There's transparency. It's data driven. So those are the 2 questions that I always use and guide them towards what they can do on our platform in acquiring.
Got it. I love that. And one of the things, even we did at Trufan, anytime a customer left or anyone, that didn't see value in the platform, normally a question that we'd like to ask them, especially over email, was what was it about the platform that even enticed you in the first place to get on a call with us? Because clearly something interested you. And then when we got on a call, expectations were misaligned. So what did you expect coming in you were going to hear and be delivered? And sometimes that's really cool in terms of looking back at your messaging, even on your website, on the ads that you're putting out, or even in how you're telling your story to other people. It really gives you a good reflection into how you can fine tune that to make sure that expectations on both sides coming into a demo call or an interview aren't misaligned. But Khushboo, today you've shared some awesome stories, some great insights. One final question we ask every guest before we wrap up would be, if you had to restart your entire journey today, so go back to September 2019, an amazing period, by the way, pre-COVID, what would be your first steps to set yourself up for success? If you had to start over all over again, it doesn't have to be linked to acquiring your first customers. What would be some things that you do to really set yourself up for doing well?
So if we were to start all over again, I think the one thing that we overemphasized on was making sure that the product is perfect. Like I started, it's like making sure everything behind the hood works really, really well and smoothly, like a well-oiled machine. We spent too little time on, for example, how our website looks and what kind of design and messaging and text we are using on our website, because we are like, okay, let's get the product perfect, because these things can happen. But what we've realized over time is, it's like, if your house isn't attractive from outside, nobody's stepping in. So you don't get a chance to actually showcase how awesome it is from the inside if you cannot kind of evoke positive emotions from the outside. So having that part is just as important as trying to perfect the product, which is, I think, one learning that we've had, that they are equally important and they go hand in hand. It's not a sequential thing.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you so much, Khushboo, for joining us in this episode of Next in Tech. Everyone, please help me give Khushboo a round of virtual applause now. Send some emojis from the emoji cannon across our screen. And thanks so much to all of you for joining us. Had a blast today hosting this conversation. I'm now going to turn it over to Liz to share what's happening next.
This was such a fun conversation. I was sitting here like taking notes and laughing along with you too. So thank you so much for coming today and for sharing with all of us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. We hope to see you again soon. And we actually had members of our community say in the chat they remember the last time you were on our stage as well. So beloved members of our TechTO community, everyone. And remember, you can watch the replays and you can watch previous appearances on our shows live in the Insiders Vault. We'll share some links in Slack after the show so you can go back and watch some of those replays later. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can let us know by sharing on LinkedIn and Twitter using the hashtag TechTO. We love to hear your feedback. And as well, if you had a great time, come back for our next 2 episodes. We have 2 episodes left of this mini series. Next, coming up in 2 weeks, your first hires. We will be uncovering all of the details of what you need to know for expanding your team and making growth possible. And then coming up at the end of April, managing mental roadblocks. So we've talked a lot about, what you expect when you're acquiring customers, when you're creating your MVP and launching it, when you're growing your team, but equally as important, the mental roadblocks that you face in your journey. And they're things that every founder goes through and that everyone faces. We will be unpacking and sharing tactics for coping and for keeping the ball rolling. That's April 29th, same time, 12 p.m. Eastern. Links are available on the website and via TechTO Slack. So head over to the Insider Slack to get your tickets for the next show. Now we will be moving into the networking portion of our event, and we encourage everyone to stick around, make a new connection, meet someone new, and continue to learn and grow together. This has been Liz from TechTO on behalf of Swish, Khushboo, I, and the whole TechTO team. Thank you so much for coming. We'll see you at the next episode, and we will see you at future TechTO events.